The light in my room was off when I turned into the driveway. That sounds like a small thing, but I always left the lamp on. The one on the nightstand that my husband had picked up at an estate sale in Vermont 30 years ago, the one with the amber shade that made everything look warmer than it was. And I had left it on that morning before I went to my eye appointment. I knew I had. I always did. The driveway was full. My son-in-law's truck sat in the spot where my car usually went, so I parked on the street and gathered my grocery bags from the back seat. 2 bags from Harris Teeter, a paper bag from the pharmacy with my refill. My knees had been bothering me since the morning, and the walk up the front path felt longer than it was. I noticed the front door was already unlocked. I noticed the smell of sawdust before I even stepped inside. My grandson appeared at the top of the stairs. He was 12 years old and tall for his age, and he stood there with his backpack still on, looking at me the way children look when they already know something. And they're waiting to see if you know it yet. "Hey, Grandma," he said. His voice was careful. "Hey, sweet pea, I set the grocery bags on the entryway bench. What's going on in here?" Before he could answer, my son-in-law came around the corner from the hallway. He was in sweatpants on a Thursday, which told me everything about his mood. He had the expression of someone who had already rehearsed this. "Good, you're back," he said. "We need to talk about some changes." I looked past him. The door to my bedroom, the one at the end of the hall, the east-facing room that got the morning light, was open. 2 of my cardboard boxes were stacked in the hallway. My son-in-law said his parents were coming, permanently. They needed a real space. The room made the most sense, he said, the room with the good light. I could have the basement. He'd already put the air mattress down there. He'd pick up a space heater by the weekend. I didn't speak. I waited one moment to make sure I'd heard correctly. Then I picked up my grocery bags and walked into the kitchen and began putting things away. My daughter came in from the living room, holding the baby on her hip. She looked at me for exactly 1 second, and then looked down at the baby's sock, which she adjusted with tremendous focus. She said nothing. I said good evening, and started unpacking the bread and the yogurt and the bunch of carrots I'd bought, because my grandson had been asking about carrots all week for some school project about nutrition. Behind me, I could feel her standing there. The baby made small sounds. My daughter didn't move. "Mom," she said finally. "It's all right," I said. I meant it as a dismissal, not a reassurance. I had lived long enough to know that certain conversations are not conversations at all. They are announcements, and the only dignified response to an announcement is silence, and then time, and then action. I had moved in with my daughter and son-in-law 4 years earlier, when the baby was 9 weeks old, and they had sat me down at the kitchen table and done the math out loud. Full-time daycare in this part of the city ran close to $2,200 a month. My son-in-law's commute was 90 minutes each way. My daughter had gone back to work at 14 weeks because her leave had run out and they needed the income. They asked if I might come stay for a few months, just until they found their footing. I came. I sold the house I'd been living in alone since my husband died and put the money in savings and brought 3 boxes of things I actually needed. The few months became a year. The year became another year. By the time anyone thought to revisit the arrangement, it had become the load-bearing wall of their entire structure. I cooked breakfast before anyone else was up. I drove my grandson to school at 7:45 and picked him up at 3:15 and managed homework and snack, and dinner prep and bath time and bedtime on the nights my daughter worked late, which was most nights. I took the baby to her pediatric appointments and kept a green spiral notebook in my purse with every relevant number: pediatrician, dentist, pharmacy, the name of the specific brand of diaper she tolerated without rash, the grape-flavored Tylenol because she rejected the cherry. I folded laundry. I remembered which neighbors had dogs that frightened the baby, and which teacher at my grandson's school had a nut allergy, and which neighbor had the spare key and where the backup thermometer lived. I had not once asked to be thanked. I'm not saying that to claim virtue. I'm saying it because it's relevant to what came later. The basement was not finished. It had a concrete floor, a pull-chain bulb overhead, Two plastic utility shelves along one wall holding cleaning supplies and bins, labeled Halloween and Christmas in my daughter's handwriting. The air mattress was in the corner by the utility sink. Someone had thrown a fitted sheet over it, but hadn't tucked the corners. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then I walked in and sat on the edge of the air mattress. It shifted under me. That first night I could hear them above me. The scrape of chairs. The television my son-in-law kept too loud. His laugh, which always ran a beat too long. The baby cried around 9 and I heard footsteps cross the floor above my head. She settled. The house went quiet. I lay on my back on the air mattress in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did not cry. I had not cried in front of people in many years, and I was not going to start now, alone in a basement that smelled like laundry detergent and old cardboard. I was 63 years old. I had a pension from 31 years of teaching elementary school music. I had a savings account. I had tucked in a wooden box in a cardboard box currently stacked in the hallway where my bedroom used to be, a document I had not looked at in over a year. I thought about that document for a while. Then I let myself sleep. My grandson came down the next morning before anyone else was awake. He was in his school clothes, and he was carrying something bundled under one arm. He came down the stairs carefully, one step at a time, and set it on the mattress beside me. It was his old Boy Scout sleeping bag, the good one with the flannel lining. "It's warmer," he said. "Thank you, honey." He looked around the basement with the expression he used for math problems. Then he went back upstairs and returned with a lamp, his grandfather's reading lamp, the one I'd given him for his room 2 Christmases ago. He found an outlet behind the utility shelf and plugged it in. Warm amber light spread across the concrete floor. He sat on the bottom step with his backpack. "Grandma," he said, "this is wrong." "I know." "So why aren't you?" "Because I'm deciding," I said. "There's a difference between doing nothing and deciding. I'm deciding." He didn't look satisfied. But he was 12, and I had lived through enough to know that patience looks like weakness until it doesn't. His parents arrived on a Saturday with 3 SUV loads of luggage and the energy of people who had been waiting a long time to be comfortable somewhere. His mother was through the front door and into the kitchen before she'd even set her purse down. She ran one finger along the stovetop and asked if the coffee maker was a carafe or single cup. "Carafe," my son-in-law said, "just like you like." His father dropped into the living room armchair and asked whether we had the regional sports package. No one answered him. My daughter brought them both sweet tea without being asked, a gesture so practiced it broke something in me just slightly, and I went back to the kitchen and made dinner. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with slivered almonds. I set the table and poured water and brought out bread because his father had mentioned once, months ago in an offhand way, that he liked bread with dinner. His mother took one bite of the chicken and said it was a little dry. She asked if there was any Dijon. "I'll check the fridge," my daughter said. I watched my grandson across the table. He was looking at his plate with the same expression he used when he was trying not to say something. I caught his eye and shook my head very small. He looked back at his plate and ate his green beans. 2 nights later, I was at the kitchen sink with the water running when I heard his mother's voice float in from the dining room. She was saying something that made my son-in-law laugh, the real laugh, not the polite one. I caught the phrase "all these years" and then "free of charge" and then "some people." I turned the faucet up. My daughter brought in the last of the glasses and set them by the sink. She stood there for a moment. "Good night," I said. I dried my hands and went to bed. I waited until the house was fully quiet before I went to the hallway. The cardboard boxes were still stacked where my son-in-law had put them. I found the wooden one, the flat cedar box my husband had made the year before he died. The one I'd told my daughter contained old photographs, which was partly true. I brought it downstairs. Inside the cedar box, beneath a folded wool scarf and 2 envelopes of photographs, was an accordion folder. Inside the accordion folder was a property deed. My husband and I had bought the condo in 1999, 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, corner unit in a building 12 miles from here. We'd paid $91,000 for it, cash, Because he was stubborn about debt and so was I. We'd spent 11 years saving for it. He'd chosen the building because it was 1 block from a bakery he liked, and when he died, I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I rented it instead. Good tenants, mostly. A graduate student, a couple from Ohio, a woman who worked at the hospital and kept orchids on every windowsill. I rented it slightly below market rate, and they stayed, and the money went into a separate account, not the joint household account. Not the one my daughter occasionally transferred money into. Mine. The last tenants had moved out 6 weeks ago. I'd been slow finding new ones. I told myself I was being thoughtful about it. I held the deed in both hands. My name, alone on the signature line. My husband's estate had passed it to me cleanly. The property had never been in my daughter's name, never mentioned in any family conversation, never come up once in 4 years of living in someone else's house. No one in this house had ever thought to ask what I owned. I folded the deed back into the folder. I put the folder back in the cedar box. I pulled my grandson's Boy Scout sleeping bag up around my shoulders and sat for a long time listening to the house above me settle into sleep. I had been deciding for 2 weeks. I was done deciding. I left on a Wednesday before anyone's alarm. I took my clothes, my books, the cedar box, and the small lamp my grandson had brought down for me. I packed a grocery bag with coffee and bread and peanut butter and apples. I folded the air mattress back the way I'd found it and set the sleeping bag on top, corners tucked. I went upstairs once. The house was dark. I walked past the room where his parents were sleeping. I could hear snoring through the door and into my grandson's room. He slept with one arm thrown over his eyes, the way he'd slept since he was 4. I took a notacard from his desk and wrote his name across the front. I tucked it inside the library book on his nightstand, a biography of a baseball player he'd been working his way through all fall. Then I let myself out the front door and drove away. The condo was on the 3rd floor, corner unit. I took the elevator because my knees won't hear otherwise, and I stood in the hall for 1 moment before I put the key in. Inside it smelled like emptiness, clean, still, waiting. The previous tenants had left it careful. Wiped-down counters, vacuum lines still faint in the carpet, a paper cup sleeve on the kitchen cabinet. Afternoon light came in flat and honest through the windows. I set my bag down on the kitchen floor. I found a paper cup and filled it at the tap and drank it standing at the counter. Outside, a bus went by. Somewhere below, a car alarm chirped once and stopped. I was 63 years old, standing in a room that belonged entirely to me. I had owned it for 26 years. I had never needed permission to be here. I opened all 3 windows. The first week surprised me. I slept without bracing for sounds. I woke when I woke. I made coffee and drank it by the window watching the parking structure across the street, which I had always found oddly soothing. The geometry of it, the pigeons, the way the light moved across the levels at different hours. I walked to the grocery store 2 blocks away and bought only what I actually wanted to eat. I bought a small toolkit at the hardware store and hung 3 photographs on the kitchen wall. My husband, alone. My grandson at age 6, holding a fish he'd caught with his grandfather, both of them squinting in the sun. The 2 of us at his 3rd grade spring concert, both of us red-faced from laughing, because he'd missed his cue and collided with the boy next to him. The 4th day I had a locksmith come and replace the locks. My daughter called once. I let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail. 2 days later, she forwarded me a text from his mother asking where the good mixing bowls were stored. I put my phone face down on the counter and made myself a grilled cheese. My grandson found the note card on a Thursday and called me from the school library during lunch, which is the only time they're permitted to use their phones. "You left," he said. "I did." "Are you okay?" "I'm very okay," I said. "Better than I've been in a while, actually." A pause. "Can I come see you?" He arrived on Saturday on his bicycle, helmet crooked, backpack half unzipped. He had taken the city bus most of the way, transferred once, the route I'd taught him when he was 10, and ridden the last mile. He stood in the middle of the empty living room and turned in a slow circle, the way he'd done in new spaces, since he was small, mapping things out. "This is yours," he said, not a question. mine and your grandfather's. His name was on the deed until he died." He went to the window and looked at the parking structure for a long moment. "I like it," he said with absolute seriousness. We ate grilled cheese on paper plates at the kitchen counter, and he told me about his baseball team and the biography and the fact that his grandmother, his grandfather's mother, the one who had just arrived to displace me, asked every single morning where the good mixing bowls were. He said this with the flat exhaustion of someone much older than 12, and I had to press my lips together. When he left, he called me from the bus. "You left the lamp," he said. "That lamp was always yours," I said. A long pause. "Grandma, I don't think they know what they did." "Maybe not," I said. "They'll figure it out." My daughter called on a Sunday, and this time I picked up. She was already crying when I said hello. Not dramatically, just the wrung-out kind, the kind that comes from running out of room to hold things in. She said the baby had an ear infection, and she couldn't find the pediatrician's card, and she'd realized in that moment that I'd always kept all of it, in the green notebook in my purse, and she hadn't known where to look, and she'd had to call the nurse's line and waited 40 minutes while the baby screamed. "The card is on the inside cover of the green spiral notebook," I said. "Second drawer of the mudroom cabinet. The backup thermometer is in the bathroom cabinet above the toilet, not the medicine one. And she takes the grape-flavored Tylenol, not the cherry. She gags on the cherry." Silence. "I know," my daughter said finally. Her voice was very small. "I know you kept all of that." "I did. I should have." She stopped. "He said things about you while you were there. I heard some of them and I didn't say anything, and I should have." "Yes, eyes, just yes," nothing added. "Will you come back? Just to help us get things sorted. Just for a little while." I looked out the window. The pigeons were doing whatever pigeons do on a Sunday afternoon, living their small, contented pigeon lives. "No," I said. "I won't come back to that house. But I'm not gone. I'm 12 miles away, and you can call me when you need the pediatrician's number. You can call me when you want to talk to your mother. Those things are available to you." I let a breath out. "But I'm not coming back to sleep in that basement. And you know this isn't about the basement." A long pause. The kind that means someone is deciding whether to understand something they've been avoiding understanding. "I know," she said quietly. "Good," I said. "That's where we start." His parents were gone by the end of October. My daughter told me this from her car in a grocery store parking lot, which had become her preferred location for honest phone calls. His mother's sinuses, apparently, did not agree with the humidity. His father missed his golf club in Arizona. They were back in the Southwest within 6 weeks of arriving, leaving behind, according to my daughter, a recliner neither she nor my son-in-law knew what to do with, and a cabinet full of supplements no one had asked for. His mother had said, on her last morning there, that the house had felt empty since I left. She had not spoken to me directly during the entire time I lived in that basement. My daughter relayed this without editorial. I didn't offer any. "I think she meant it as an insult," my daughter said. "I know she did," I said. It was still accurate. Full-time childcare for 2 children in our part of the state, my daughter also told me, ran roughly $3,800 a month. She said this in the tone of someone doing arithmetic they should have done years ago. I didn't comment. Some things don't need commentary. They just need to be understood. November came in cold and silver gray, the good kind of November that smells like wood smoke and the end of something. I found a braided oval rug at a Saturday market, the kind my mother used to keep by the back door, and put it in the center of the living room floor. I sat on it with my coffee and my library book and decided that was sufficient furniture for the time being. I had a card table, 2 folding chairs, a rug, a bed, and 3 photographs on the kitchen wall. What else does a person genuinely need? My grandson came every other Saturday. He brought a friend sometimes, and I made sandwiches, and they sat on the floor because the apartment remained mostly unfurnished, and none of us minded. We found the card table at a Goodwill 2 blocks away. He helped me carry it up in the elevator, holding one end, giving instructions about the corners, with the focused competence of someone who takes small tasks seriously. One Saturday in late November, we played 2 rounds of gin rummy at the card table, and he beat me both times. Real beats, not the ones I used to hand him when he was 8. Your grandfather taught me that game, I said. Tell me something about him I don't know, he said. I thought about it. He always left a light on, I said. In every house we ever had. He said he never wanted to come home to a dark window. Said a lit window was the simplest way to tell someone they were expected. My grandson nodded, the slow nod he used when he was filing something away where he'd be able to find it later. He left around 4, down the elevator, out through the lobby. I watched from the window until he rounded the corner and disappeared. Then I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and stood for a moment looking at the 3 photographs on the wall. My husband squinting. My grandson at 6 holding that ridiculous fish with both hands. The 2 of us was red-faced at the spring concert. I thought about the accordion folder in the card table drawer, the deed with the faded fold lines. My husband's handwriting in the upper corner unit. 3rd floor, hours. And the small star he'd drawn next to the word hours, the kind of star a person draws when they mean something without wanting to make a speech about it. I pulled the drawer open and took the deed out and set it flat on the table. Ran my finger along the fold. My name, clean and alone on the signature line, the way it had been since the lawyer's office called me 6 months after the funeral to confirm the transfer was complete. I had owned this place for 26 years. The mortgage had been paid off before my grandson was born. The property value, according to Zillow, had done things I tried not to think too hard about, because that was not the point. The point was that I had always had somewhere to go. I had stayed, year after year, because I had chosen to. Because my daughter needed me, and the children needed me, and I was still a person who showed up where she was needed. That was who I was, and I didn't regret a single morning of it. But choosing to stay is not the same as having to stay. And there is a difference, a very significant one, between giving your time to people you love and having your time assumed by people who have stopped noticing the shape of what you carry. I folded the deed back along its old lines and put it in the drawer. The kettle clicked off. I made my tea. I turned on the lamp by the window, the thrift store one with the amber shade, and sat in the chair I'd pulled close to the glass and watched the parking structure go dim as the last light left the sky. The lamp stayed on. I had left it on every night since I moved in, without thinking much about why, until now. A lit window, the simplest way to tell someone they were expected. A habit I'd picked up from a man who understood that love, at its most practical, is just making sure the light is on when someone comes home. Outside, the pigeons settled onto their ledges for the night. The city made its quiet sounds. My tea was hot and the chair was comfortable and the rug was the good braided kind, and somewhere in the buildings, someone was cooking something that smelled like garlic and olive oil. Everything in this apartment was mine. Bought, earned, carried, chosen. Not inherited, not borrowed, not contingent on anyone's goodwill or anyone's plans. Mine in the plainest, most uncomplicated sense of the word. I wrapped both hands around the mug and let the warmth settle into my knuckles, which had been aching since the cold came in, and I did not think about the basement or the air mattress or the snoring behind a closed door or the sound of a laugh running one beat too long. I thought about gin rummy and grilled cheese and a 12-year-old boy who took the bus across the city on his own because he wanted to sit on the floor with his grandmother in an apartment with no furniture. I thought about what it felt like to stop waiting for something to change and just go. I thought about my husband drawing that little star next to the word hours. The lamp stayed on. I was 63 years old, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be.